Gunnar Branson with NAREIM. Mr. Branson is the president and CEO of the National Association of Real Estate Investment Managers, as an association of companies engaged in the real estate investment management business in the United States. Before joining NAREIM in 2011, Mr. Branson worked for over 25 years in commercial real estate, professional services sales, product innovation, and marketing. In addition to holding leadership roles at companies such as GE Capital, Real Estate, and Heller Financial, as a consultant, he worked with companies such as Jones Lang LaSalle, Wells Fargo, and Fidelity to develop new markets and new products, including sustainability and energy conservation services. His consulting practice is centered on change acceleration and practical innovation. Some of his writings on innovation, finance, and commercial real estate can be found at www.bransonpowers.com. So if he is, I hope he's in the audience somewhere. There he is. There he is. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, and congratulations to those of you that got past the traffic on the highway between Boulder and Denver. I think probably our best way to start this, also, by the way, I wanted to thank Chris Crosby and Jim Creighton for bringing me here and giving me an amazing couple of days here in your beautiful city. I always love coming down to Colorado, mostly because I like being out of breath. It's always lots of fun for me. So if I pass out halfway through here, you'll know why. I think this is an interesting, let me put it this way. This is the most exciting time in recent history to be in commercial real estate. This is the most terrifying time in our recent history to be in commercial real estate. Every time I speak with my members who are large private equity investors in commercial real estate about how their days are going, how the year is going, I get the same answer, especially in the last couple of years. That's okay, it's good, it's good. I'm working twice as hard to get half as much done. I don't know what's going to happen. It's getting strange. It's good, it's good. No, it's good. It's good. There's a general sense of uncertainty and discomfort in the air, which, it's good. It's good. It's good in a couple of ways, I think. Number one, it means opportunity, certainly. Number two, it means it's interesting to talk about. Number three, it means when you're giving a presentation on the current state of the real estate market, you get to have both sex and violence at the same time. In other words, it's a James Bond movie out there. Be careful. There's definitely change in the air. It's harder to predict what's going on than it has been in 50 years. All the arrows are doing this instead of doing a regular kind of cycle that we can all understand and that we can all do things with. And yet, commercial real estate, and one of the reasons why I love being in this industry and why I love being able to talk with people like you, is that this is the one industry where we really have to look to the future more than any other. We buy something, we build something, we lease something. We got to live with that for a while. We have to eat our own cooking for a considerable period of time, and if we get it wrong, it hurts. It hurts a lot. If we get it right, it's a lot of fun. So how is it that you can look at 7 years in the future? I can't predict what's going to happen next month. How on earth can we predict what's going to happen 7 years from now? It's very difficult, if not impossible, because we're dealing with a very, very complex environment. We're dealing with a lot of different forces that are changing it. However, I would submit to you that you don't have to predict the future in order to understand where things are going. There's a concept that, any of you read the writings of Gaston Bachelard? Poetics of Space, mid-century French philosopher. I know, that's all you want to do is read mid-century French philosophers. No? Okay. He wrote something called The Poetics of Space, where he talked about what space means, what real estate means, in terms of our memories, in terms of our behavior, in terms of our lifetimes. He also talked a bit about something called desire lines. Desire lines are very simple. They're the paths we leave behind us as we live our lives. And you've all seen them. You've seen many of them. Think about the last time you went to a park, you went to a college campus. Actually, I just saw one in the Highlands where you have those wonderful pedestrian bridges and parks in between. Desire lines are those paths that we leave in the grass where people walk where they want to walk as opposed to where the paths have been laid out by brilliant designers. It's the stuff we do, not the stuff that we think we do. And one thing that I've always found fascinating about desire lines is that they will not be resisted. There is nothing we can do to change the desire lines. Have you ever noticed when the landscape guy puts a big boulder in the middle of the desire line to stop people from destroying his beautiful grass? And then suddenly you have two desire lines that go around it, right? There's another desire line, by the way, if you go away from landscaping. And by the way, the best way to do landscaping is don't put any paths in when you first build it. Just leave it as grass, and a year later, you'll know where to put the paths. Follow the desire lines as opposed to trying to predict the desire lines. You'll be a lot happier, you'll spend a lot less money, and you're not going to have an aggravated landscaper. It's going to work, and it's going to be pretty. Actually, that's how it's done in a lot of European countries now. The Nordics, you know how practical those Swedes are. I'm sorry, I am a Swede, so I have to have some pride, even though we're completely goofy and our food is terrible. And we all marry Italians, and there's a reason for that, because we're just desperate for good food and a little bit of fun, and the dourness of Swedishness. The only way we have fun is we get completely blotto. It's not a good thing. But we're very good at following desire lines. Because what they'll do is they'll do exactly what I told you. They'll watch the snow, and they'll watch the paths that people leave in the snow between buildings, and then they'll know where to put the paths. And that's following desire lines. There's some great desire lines out there that prove this point utterly. And the point really is, you cannot control demand through supply. Listen to that a second, because we spent the last 70 years in this country trying to control demand through supply. And here's what happens. Any of you familiar with the illegal narcotics trade? I know in Colorado it's a little odd. Back in the 1980s, we declared war on this narcotics trade, and we figured that if we could constrain the supply coming into this country of illegal narcotics, that we could increase the price and that we could reduce the amount of people whose lives were ruined by illegal narcotics. And we spent millions, billions of dollars and countless numbers of lives and warships and God knows what else we did in order to stop it. And what was the net effect? The price of narcotics on the street went down. The amount of narcotics flooding our cities increased, not decreased. They just went through different paths. We put a big boulder in the middle of the path and they found two more paths. Demand will not be resisted. And Colorado's engaging in a wonderful experiment where you're going to try to do something with demand as opposed to supply. I hope you're successful. I think it's a very interesting experiment. Especially interesting for those of you that like to toke up. So that's great. I personally am, I prefer gin, but that's because I'm Scandinavian. So another example of desire lines that is much more important to us as business people. Any of you familiar with this company that has an apple on it? Oh, it's called Apple, right? What happened there? Back in 1999, 2000, the music business sold records, sold CDs, to the tune of around $38 billion a year. Fantastic business, incredible business. And you had 3 or 4 entrenched players that really commanded the business, and they had held on to it for decades. And it was a really, really powerful business. $38 billion, nothing to sneeze at. And then, this guy with a funny-looking mock turtleneck and wire-rimmed glasses said, I think I'm seeing a desire line here. And the desire line was quite simple, mixtapes. Any of you, those of you that are around my age or older, remember mixtapes? If it weren't for mixtapes, I wouldn't be married. It's fantastic. What we would do is we would buy the records, we'd play them, and we'd record them on a tape, one song at a time, and we'd put together what we actually wanted, which was control of our own music, song by song by song. Everyone thinks that the invention that Apple really did was the iPod. Well, the real innovation there was iTunes, and the ability to buy music, song by song, anytime you wanted. Why is that important? Because in 7 years, the record business dropped by half. Can you imagine what would happen if the next 7 years you lost half your business? What that would mean? Cataclysm. And they've lost even more since then. All because of this funny little idea of following a desire line. I always find it interesting when people are selling something different from what people are buying. So in that case, the record business was selling records, and people were buying songs. They were just buying the records in order to get the songs. So whenever people are buying something different from what you are selling, you are vulnerable to someone to come in and disrupt your market and figure out how to change the business entirely. So a wonderful example of that is in real estate, what do we sell? Any ideas? What do we sell in real estate? Square feet. We sell square feet. We lease it, we buy it, we sell it, we build it. I think it's always interesting and different. Have you ever noticed that the square footage of buildings tends to expand and contract over time? I have this vision of these ballooning buildings doing this all the time in terms of their square footage. Funny how that works. We sell square footage. What do people buy? Any thoughts? What do people buy? They're not buying square feet. They're buying space. They're buying experience. They're buying productivity. They're buying a really nice view. They're buying, I don't know what they're buying, a bachelor pad. They're buying things that are experiences, and they are using square footage to get what they want. But they don't care as much about square footage as we do. In fact, they don't even know what it is. They can't conceptualize the difference between 700 and 900 square feet, but they can conceptualize and want to understand what the experience is in that building, what the amenities are in that building, and whether or not it'll help them get a date. They'll understand that. We all understand that intuitively. Unless they're very good at making mixtapes, then, you know, it's a completely different thing. So I think one of the things that we have to do in terms of understanding how we can get out of this vulnerability, this key vulnerability to our industry, which is only becoming apparent now as so many things and desires are changing dramatically, thanks to technology, demographics. Oh, by the way, what's with all these young people? They want different things than we do. Kids today, they're just crazy with their, you know, technology and stuff. Goofy, you know. They should be like us and watch TV 5 hours a day. You know, that made us into, you know, really good people when we were growing up. What are they doing? They're texting each other. They're talking to each other. They're interacting. They've got this weird, you know, compunction to actually socialize. It's just weird, dangerous. It's going to change our world. I would submit to you that we actually have the wrong rules of real estate. What are the 3 rules of real estate? Come on, you guys going to college, you're all alumni, things like that. 3 rules of real estate are location, location, location. Get the right location, you win. I've always been bothered by that, not because it's just entirely too cute, but also because it kind of suggests that we are not captains of our own destiny, that we are victims of place, as opposed to the people that actually make place. And there's been so many times in my career in real estate where I've seen us create location. Not easy to do, and very easy to get it wrong, but it is possible for us to create location. Does anyone know where that came from, by the way? Any ideas? Disney? Where did the idea of location, location, location being the 3 rules of real estate, where did that first happen? It's a great question. William Safire did a piece a few years before he died where he actually asked that question, where did this come from? And people he talked to said, I don't know. I mean, you know, it's been around forever, 100 years, 200 years. Maybe someone came up with it in England. I don't know. You know, it's just something that's always been around. Well, the first recorded mention of location, location, location that William Safire and his researchers could come up with actually dated 1926. And it was an advertisement in the Chicago Tribune, which was great for me because I'm a Chicago boy. I like seeing that. 1926, basically an ad for sales managers saying, location, 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 the future is in Rogers Park. Any of you from Chicago? Know Chicago area, neighborhoods? Rogers Park, do you know what Rogers Park is? All right, it's throughout its entire history has been half of the median value of assets anywhere else in the city of Chicago. Location, location, location. In other words, it's a big fat lie used by salesmen to get you to buy crap. The central golden rules of real estate is a big fat lie. So we got to come up with new rules. So what should those rules be? Well, since I have your attention for a few moments here before you go on to real interesting stuff, let me submit to you 3 ideas for what those rules might be. And great ways to kind of guide our thinking as we go through it. Number 1, density. We monetize density. The more people we can pack into a square foot, the more money we make. And there's actually some macro trends that are helping us along. Have you guys ever heard of Moore's Law? Moore's Law? You've heard of it? Oh, come on. You're aware of the world around you, right? Moore's Law is a very basic idea. Moore was an engineer back in the early 60s. He noticed that every 18 months we seemed to double the amount of circuits we could put on a chip. Now, in the 1960s, that didn't mean much because they started with a couple of circuits on a chip. And so doubling at that point didn't have much of an impact. But by the time we got to the 1980s, it was starting to get interesting because now we were able to do PCs instead of computers that took up, whole rooms. And then it was accelerating even faster because by the 90s, we all had laptops and we were all on the internet. And by 2000, we were packing the equivalent of the Apollo space program in one of these things. And I bought this about 18 months ago, so whatever you guys are buying today is probably double the capacity of this. And that keeps happening. It's still happening. Every 18 months, we're doubling what we can do. Now, at first we think, oh, that's great. I'm not in the computer business. I don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to get disrupted by Moore's Law the way that all those wackos that work in tech get whacked around by Moore's Law all the time. So in real estate, we're safe. We sell square footage. What does this have to do with us? Well, there's an interesting thing about what this little device is becoming. Do any of you remember, those of us that are over the age of, say, 35, do you remember when you left college? Any of you have a book collection? You didn't read. None of you read. Interesting. So I shouldn't have brought up Bachelard, right? That was a bad idea. Any of you have a record collection? Vinyl? Remember that? I know I did. I was hip. I had, the latest and greatest by Queen. So, I was cool. How much square footage did that junk take up? Lots. 100 square feet? 150 maybe? Kids today, those of you that are in graduate school or are coming out, where do you fit all your books and your records? In your pocket. What's interesting about new apartments that are being built today, which those of us that are old guys and gals think is entirely too small, I couldn't possibly live there, where would I put all my junk? Is about 100 to 200 square feet less than the buildings that were being built for us in terms of an apartment basis. We've reduced the amount of square footage. What's interesting, though, is that square footage has not impacted the square footage experience of someone in these apartments because they don't have all the junk. The catalogs alone must have taken up about 10 square feet. I mean, we were filling our spaces with junk, and then we went out into the suburbs and started buying crap and filling up. I have a garage full of stuff that what is this stuff that's there? What's interesting to me, and Bachelard talked about this in the 1950s as well, is that we tend to use physical stuff as memory markers, as experiences. We hold our media, we hold our ideas, we hold our thoughts, we hold our memories in stuff. But if you are a young person that's been suckled on technology over the last 20, 30 years, you keep all your memory in here. You remember by networking with other people. You remember because Google will answer any question that you want to answer. So you don't need to have that big book collection or that big tchotchke collection that helps you remember those golden days because it's all being remembered with electrons. We are shifting from atoms to electrons. And when you think about the difference in size between an atom and an electron, it's no wonder that we're shrinking our square footage. Law firms drive our CBDs like crazy. Those wonderful law firms. Actually, I love law firms. I think there's lots of interesting things to say about them. I come from a legal family. Law firms are great. But what I really like about law firms as a real estate person is that they use up prime real estate. They love to consume lots of square footage of really expensive stuff. If it weren't for lawyers, it would be very tough for us to justify $85 a foot even in Manhattan. I mean, God, I love lawyers. I just want to kiss their feet. It's because of them that I have a living today. But an interesting thing is happening to lawyers. They used to have books. Law books was a key part. They had to buy the new ones and update them every year, and they had these big libraries, especially the best firms. These huge libraries that took up whole floors of really expensive real estate. Oh, God, those were the days. After the recession, they got rid of all the books, except for that one shelf that they stand in front of when they're being videotaped so they can look like a lawyer, because we know that's what lawyers have as books. And they got rid of their file cabinets, or a good number of them, because a lot of them have become electronic. Just for fun, if any of you have had a chance to do this, make sure when you go into an office that has lots of file cabinets, you know, the big long rows of them, just peek inside them a little bit as you go through the office. You're going to see a lot of files from the 1990s and 1980s that are starting to yellow around the edges, and you're going to find also a lot of women's shoes. I don't know why exactly, except all these women have smaller spaces, and they keep buying shoes anyway, and so they're putting them in the office. I believe that my manager of marketing, she must have at least half a dozen shoes hidden throughout our office. It's incredible. Oh, shoes. You know, it's always there. So we've gotten rid of the file cabinets, we've gotten rid of the books. Oh, and by the way, we've gotten rid of the need to live in the office. Do you remember back in the 90s, way back, when you'd go into a law firm on Saturday or Sunday? Remember how active it was? Everyone was there. Because lawyers, God love them, they work and work and work. You know, being the son of a lawyer, I understand that. I don't quite remember him because he was always at the office. Well, now lawyers come home because they have everything in their laptop. They still work. They're just working in their home office, which means I'm really worried about how much do they need A-class office space, because they don't live there anymore. They need a little bit of it to impress their clients and to justify their fees, but they don't need quite as much for themselves to live there. As it is, every law firm, when they sign up for a new lease, is a 30% less square footage on a per lawyer basis across the board. And every time I talk to a law firm that's just moved into those spaces that's 30% less, what do they tell me? We could go down even more. We could go down even more. I'm starting to love lawyers a little bit less right now. Shrinking of space. But if we get more people into that space, it becomes denser, there's more monetization that we can do, we can make more money off of it. If you look at co-share spaces, and it's a space that everyone should pay attention to, they're literally saying, you know what, instead of giving you square footage, we're going to give you a membership. And you can come to our offices, and you can upgrade your membership and get better spaces for yourself, or you can put your name on the front door somewhere, but basically it's a membership. And a funny thing about memberships, any of you looked at the business model for health clubs? Okay, so you sell 100 memberships and maybe 20 people use the space, but they're still paying you every month. Every time they get on the scale, I got to sign up again for that gym membership. It's great, because basically every square foot, instead of being used for one person, is now being used for 3 people. That's what's happening in offices. I was talking to someone who has a co-share space just the other day, and he was saying, you know, actually what we've got is a 3X. In other words, we have 10 chairs and 30 people for 10 chairs. 30 people are paying for those 10 chairs. Have you ever noticed, and there's been a lot of study on this, that in most offices, people are actually butt in chair 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 30% of the time. That means we have all this space that isn't being used. Now, that's great for people that use office. It really sucks for those of us that have lots of office. How are we going to make our office as attractive as possible, even though Moore's Law is rapidly taking away people's need to store all their stuff in our expensive real estate? But if we have lots of people in a single place, then we have monetization. Then we have opportunity. Think about this. What is a city? It's a bunch of people packed together. What is a really good retail center? A lot of people walking in and buying stuff. What's a successful restaurant? A place that can turn its tables over and over and over again. It's density of people. But what's wonderful about density of people is that we like density of people. We like congregating and having lots of people coming together. We like that. And the more in real estate that we can look at ways that we can create more density in our space, the more successful we're going to be. Let the other guys that are thinking in terms of low density lose their shirts. Those of us in the room here are all going to think about how we get more density in our buildings and how we make it more successful and how we embrace Moore's Law instead of just running in fear from them. So we need density. That's what cities work. They work and you can make money. When things are spread out, by the way, what happens to the per square foot price? It goes down. When they get done, square foot price goes up. It's pretty simple mechanics at that point. We also, by the way, like density. I know it seems weird to those of us that grew up in the 50s and 60s and 70s where everyone was trying to get away and was trying to get more space around them, but we actually like being together. That's why the hip places are the places where there's lots of people there. We like going to those places. By the way, it makes us smarter. It's been shown over and over again that the farther we are away from other people, the dumber we get. Have you ever noticed that when you get that vacation on the beach somewhere, on a resort where there's no one around and you just sit back, you're enjoying, you're having, one of those margaritas or whatever you're having, and you can't see any people, just beautiful beaches and ocean. You ever notice how slow your brain gets? I grew up in a place where there were no people around. The nearest paved road was 50 miles away. I grew up in Alaska. The nearest road was 20 or 30 miles away. And I would spend my summers getting stupid. I don't know if you've watched Alaskan politics over the last 10, 20 years, but we need density. Okay, first rule, density. How do we create density? How do we make density possible? How do we make it pleasant? And by the way, it's tough because human beings tend to smell funny and we're noisy and everything else. So the better we are at figuring out how to make people like being dense, the more likely that our assets are going to be worth more money. Number 2 rule of real estate, diversity. Now, I work and live in a state that has a lot of farms. And there's some farms here in Colorado. And one of the rules of farming is that you can make a lot of money in the short term if you give over thousands of acres to one crop. But the instant something goes wrong, you lose it. You also tend to lose the soil. It becomes less fertile. Diversity of crops is very, very important for the long term. It's also important for your investment strategies. Diversity is important. Diversity of culture, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of thinking. The more diverse your community, the more likely that they will be able to innovate, the more likely they'll create new business, the more likely they can anticipate things that might happen, the more likely they'll see what's coming. By the way, we have a real diversity problem in this industry. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of middle-aged white guys in this room. Have you noticed? What I love is real estate relies so much on the gut. I just know it. I look at a space, how many of you have said something along the lines, I just know it, this is right. I got a good feeling about this. None of you have ever said that. None of you have ever said that. We rely on our gut a lot. But it's the gut of a middle-aged white guy. It's the gut of someone who grew up a certain way in a certain kind of community in a certain kind of world that was defined in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That world does not exist today. I'm sorry, it's over. We're in a different world. Please, I'm sorry, I know it's tragic. But I, for one, am glad that I don't have to wear any of those polyester suits. But, I think some things improve. Why are you relying on the gut of a gut that has been created in that world? It's a pretty good gut. It's been refined. It's been punished. Has lots of good scar tissue, certainly over the last recession and the recessions before it. It doesn't know everything. It doesn't see everything. If you don't have a level of diversity in your decision-making process, you are so screwed. Because you're going to keep making the same mistakes. And it hurts. I hate diversity sometimes. I hate it when people have an idea that's better than mine. I hate it when I'm wrong. It really hurts. It hurts my gut. But that's basically the gut growing. You have to listen to other things. But cities need that too. Cities need that too. And real estate definitely needs it. Diversity of use is important. As we're getting smaller, we're trying to live, work, and play all in the same space. None of you have taken care of an errand during your day at work. None of you have bought something online that you promised your spouse that you were going to take care of while you were at the office. None of you ever did that. None of you went and got a haircut in the middle of the day. None of you have bought Christmas presents in the middle of the day while you were at the office. None of you have ever done that. None of you have picked up phone calls when you went home and taken care of some things at work between your duties at home. None of you have ever done that. None of you have ever, obviously, texted and driven. Never. We like multitasking, but in order to multitask more effectively, and think about this, this is a desire line. People can't stop working, can't stop talking, can't stop communicating to each other. Just look at people's phone bills. People are constantly reaching out to each other, so much so that they're willing to risk their lives in a 1-ton piece of steel hurtling down the road at 70 miles an hour. None of you obviously have done that because you're all safe and sound and you are not terrified of being bored out of your mind while you're driving for an hour or two to get to Boulder. None of you have ever done that. Right? Right? We can't stand not being in contact with each other on a constant basis. Very few people can stand silence for more than an hour. There's a point where you have to turn on the radio, turn on the television, turn on the phone, start texting, do something to reach out to other people. We're terrified of being alone. And we're terrified of not being able to do a lot of things all in the same place. It's interesting, you look at downtown Denver, you look at community downtowns all over this country. And what are you seeing? You're seeing development of apartments, of condos, of offices, of retail, all in the same building, all in the same block, all within 4 or 5 blocks of each other. This walkability thing that's so important. Well, the reason is, do you really want to spend 2 hours staring into space while you're hurtling down a road at 70 miles an hour? Do you really, really want to do that? What is wrong with us? Oh, by the way, how much money did you spend on your last car? How much money do you spend every single month on that car that you could be spending on expensive real estate in a downtown district? I'd much rather do that. It's interesting because millennials are doing the same thing. They're not driving as much. They're driving a lot less. The amount of driver's licenses to people of driver's age has dropped from 89% in this country to 80% in this country. If you go back to the 1990s, the age cohort that I come from, in their 20s, back in the 1990s, they accounted for 20%, 21% of the miles driven in the United States. You know, young people getting cars, starting to drive. That same age cohort in 2005, now a much bigger age cohort, the millennials, so you're going to expect that they drove a lot more miles than, you know, this dinky little Gen X group. 14% of the miles driven in the United States. And that was before the recession. Young people don't drive. They live, work, and play within 5 blocks of them. Right now in Chicago, a market that was overbuilt on condos back in 2008. It will never happen again. It's going to take us 10 years to burn this shit off. It's going to take forever. We have 3 brand new luxury rental developments right on the river in downtown Chicago, and they're all filling up within a few months of being completed. Why? Google happens to be there. They're not going to go out to the neighborhoods where I live. They refuse to go farther than 4 or 5 blocks unless they have a really good bike trail. It's interesting. Diversity, density, and then finally the most important rule of all, and the one that perhaps gives us the clue to figure out what we should do next. Shared ownership. Real estate, actually, I think, of all industries in this modern capitalist structure, has done the best job of figuring out how to do that. Most of our tools for shared ownership are brilliant. What are they? The lease. We now joint own this building. You have your space that you are paying money for on a monthly basis. It's a beautiful contract that we created a long, long time ago. We've modified it a little bit, but it's a great contract. The lease. It's a shared ownership agreement. The mortgage. Brilliant. The mortgage. I own my house, maybe. Mostly it's my bank that owns it, right? But it is shared ownership. Psychologically, what does it do to you when you have shared ownership? You care about it. You take care of it. You pick up after yourself. You call someone in when there's a leaking pipe. When shared ownership breaks down, everything falls to hell in a handbasket. The joint venture agreement, a brilliant shared ownership. When we go down, we're going to go down together. Therefore, we're going to do everything we can together to make sure we don't get out of, we don't go down completely. I think real estate shows its true colors during times of workout. That's when I admire my friends and colleagues the most. It's painful, but the fact that that's what we do, Wall Street doesn't do that. Wall Street leaves the table. We stay at the table because we're bound to each other by our agreements, by the mortgage. I think the non-recourse loan is a brilliant concept, because now the banks have to behave too, because we all go down together, or we all go up together. And all of you have brilliant stories about that incredible renegotiation that occurred, and somehow you lived another day. And then eventually you got to where you were supposed to go. Shared ownership. Capitalism is really, without real estate, has a really hard time with that concept. It has a really hard time stretching things out over time. I'm always amazed that essentially real estate is something, and I didn't say this, is almost a socialist force. Why? We aggregate capital from people across our economy. through pension funds and savings programs. We aggregate that capital and then we invest it in the very infrastructure that people use in order to make more money, so that they can save it, and then we can invest it in real estate, and we build the cities. Everyone wins. It's a group or a collective experience that happens because we're all out for ourselves and trying to survive. It's brilliant. We've tricked the system as real estate professionals. We are in the business of shared ownership. How do we get people to own the building, the block, the city? Now, one of the best ways for people to feel like they own something is for them to adapt it. Have you ever noticed how people change the environment around them without asking permission, and then they feel like they own it? Let me give you an example. When I went to a very small school in the South for college, we didn't have gym facilities. We had a small gym. It was, no one really wanted to go there. But we did have a staircase, a broad staircase that went down and led to a plaza that was basically bare concrete that no one spent any time on. You just went through it as quickly as you could. This was the 70s of design, where everything was built in order to tell you how much we hate people, and we want you to get out of here as quickly as you can. And given the polyester we were wearing, that was probably not a bad idea. We had a staircase and we have this big square of concrete. So a couple of kids said, you know what, this is boring. Let's get a net, a volleyball net, and we'll put it right in front of the staircase in this expanse of concrete. And it exploded. Every night after dinner, people would sit down on the staircase and we'd play volleyball. We'd play volleyball until we lost the light every night. And then someone, jury-rigged some lights so that we could go even further. Everything was jury-rigged. We did this for years, to the point that we had school-wide competitions in what we used to call jungle ball, but basically it was volleyball with very few rules, or you just argue over the rules until you ran out of light. It was a fantastic thing. It brought the community together. We owned it. It brought the school together in a way that nothing else had ever brought us together. We were so happy. It was an idyllic time. We owned that square of concrete. And then the school looked at this and said, isn't this great? The kids, they love to play volleyball. We need to do something for them because they love to play volleyball. So they somehow scrounged some money together in their budget, and they created this beautiful volleyball sand pit somewhere off in a corner somewhere that no one could see. And they said, look, here we have this new volleyball pit for all of you. And we're taking away the net you put up and the lights you put up because it's dangerous. You can't play on concrete. You'll hurt yourself. That's terrible, and we care about you. But we'll put the volleyball over here, and look how pretty it is. That was the end of volleyball. No one ever played another game, ever. The Desire Line was not volleyball. The Desire Line was a place that we could all sit on a staircase and laugh and joke and have fun together and socialize. It was a space that we adapted for ourselves. We owned that space. We did not own the beautiful sand pit. And I don't know if you can call anything beautiful that's called a pit. It's just a problem I have. Never, one rule of the road, I travel quite a bit, never eat in a restaurant called a pit. It's just... Why do we do that? Why are we always creating spaces for people that are good for them that no one wants? I would submit that part of the reason is because we don't allow for customization. We don't allow people to change it. Most houses, after 20 years, have been adapted, have been changed. Have you ever noticed that? If you go into an older suburb, they've added on a room, they've changed something, they've switched around the bathrooms, they've changed it to work better for their lives. The buildings that last, by the way, and this was pointed out years and years and years ago by Buildings That Learn, is the most successful buildings are the ones that change. If they don't change in 20 to 30 years, there's a good chance you're going to tear it down because it doesn't work anymore. This is true of a lot of brutalist architecture from the 1970s. Again, the 1970s. We've got the polyester, we've got these big hulking concrete structures that are just downright ugly, and we can't adapt them. We can't change them. They're very, very hard to change, and that's the problem. It can't be changed. If we are creating, investing in, maintaining, designing real estate that's basically open for adaptation, there's a very good chance that it will be successful. I think it's interesting how much people will change space to make it look the way it's supposed to look. Now, a few years ago, very instructive was the city of San Francisco. Now, they've done very well, and they got those weird tech people with the funny glasses, and they like to wear hoodies, and they blade around their offices, and all sorts of weird stuff they do. But they ran out of Embarcadero a few years ago. They ran out of warehouse space. There just isn't any more left. Where did they go next? They went to those 60s and 70s office buildings that I would have written off years ago, and they adapted them. They took the bottom 6 or 7 floors that couldn't be leased, so they were cheaper than the upper floors, and they got rid of all the drop ceilings. So they suddenly made it a cool space. They got rid of all the partitions, so you had a big open floor plate that they could scooter around and wear hoodies and sit at tables and do what they do and write code. Isn't that interesting, how they're adapting our space? And yet, at the time when that first started happening, I was talking to owners of these buildings, and they're going, they'll learn. They'll put in the drop ceilings again. It'll all go the way it was before. And they're all going to move out to the suburbs, too, because, kids, once they have kids, they got to move out to the suburbs. They're not going to stick around here. It's all going to go back to the way it was before. Have any of you ever said that? Any of you at all? I know I have. Then my gut got hurt because things are changing. So 3 rules: diversity, density, shared ownership. When you look at buildings, neighborhoods, cities that have those 3 elements, chances are their rents are going up. When you see cities that don't have those 3 things, chances are rents are going down. Pretty basic in terms of how that works. Another question for you guys is, by the way, the lease has been around for a few hundred years. Is that the structure we need forever? Or is there something else out there? It used to be the only way you could have a car was if you bought it. Over the last 10 years, that has changed. 3 or 4 years ago, I had a car. I love that car. God, it was great. It was a convertible Saab. It was beautiful. I'd put that top down, instant therapy. You know that feeling? Oh, man, it was fantastic. 20-year-old car. I kept it alive. I would pull up at places, where they were going to park your car for you, and they'd go, ooh, classic. Nothing like driving a classic car when you're driving it, because the rest of the time it's just falling apart and rusting in your garage. And I finally, during the recession, I said, you know what, why am I carrying this car? I almost never drive it. And I gave it away. It was hard to watch it go. It was taken away. It was very painful. Then I turned around and got a Zipcar membership. Never been happier. There's a car block from my house that's changing all the time that I can pick up whenever I want it, whenever I don't want. I can pick one up downtown. I can go anywhere. I can have a new car at any moment to do what I need to do. There are other shared car memberships that only have Audis, only luxury cars. So basically you're buying an Audi, but you're buying it by joining a membership. Why is it that it has to be the same structure? And there are people that are pushing that in real estate. Why do you have to lease when you can just have a membership in an office setup? It's time to start asking those questions because it's about to change. Look for desire lines. The desire right now is for more life and less space. So how do we provide that? That should be the question that we're always asking. How do we give people more life and less space? It's a difficult time. There's a lot of confusion, but I look around a room like this and I have confidence because I look around and I see some really intelligent people, really smart. I mean, look around yourself. Look at your colleagues in this room. And all of us are colleagues, even those of us that are finishing off graduate degrees. You are all colleagues, and you are some of the brightest and the best. You are really smart. And strong, too. You've been through the storms. You've managed to do this even without as much oxygen as the rest of the world. It's fantastic. You are strong and smart, and I'm looking around at the firms you represent. You represent very strong platforms and very smart. You guys can deal with anything. You're smart, and you're strong. But I seem to remember back in 2006, there were some very strong and brilliant firms with names like Lehman Brothers. They were strong. They were smart. I defy you to prove to me that the people there were idiots. We say that because they were wrong, but they weren't idiots. They were educated at the best university, some of them probably university, Colorado University, I'm sure, a few of them. They were some of the smartest and some of the strongest, and they fell. The gaslight industry, before Thomas Edison messed with them, they were strong, they were smart, and they died. Xerox, the strongest and the smartest. And then a little Japanese camera company called Canon came in and ate their lunch. Was that because they were stupid or weak? They were strong. They were smart. There's this naturalist in the 19th century. I know, you guys don't read, so I'll give you a little bit of a, quick... Darwin, one of the most misunderstood scientists of the last 200 years. Because we thought he was talking, when he said survival of the fittest, we thought he meant the strongest, right? Carnegie thought that, if I'm brutal, then I will succeed. If I'm strong and smart, I will succeed. And to this day, especially in business, we tend to think of that. Whoever is the strongest and smartest is going to win. I will win if I'm strong and smart. And if I don't win right now, that means that I'm stupid and weak. And we all went through that during the recession. Come on, admit it. There were times when you felt stupid and weak. Because we all believe that only the strongest and the smartest survive. Well, it's funny because Darwin at one point said, it is not the strongest or the smartest that survive. It is the most flexible. Isn't that funny? We have to be flexible. There's a Zen koan about flexibility and strength. In a storm, which is the strongest? An oak tree or a blade of grass? This is one of the most dangerous times in the real estate business in our lifetimes. It is the most exciting time to be in real estate if we are flexible. Thank you, everyone.